we're live. Hopefully the feed is going to be good tonight. It looks like I'm having a little bit of trouble, so hopefully it works out for you guys. Tonight we're going to talk about the time that I built a excuse me, a Callaway Corvette motor. For those of you that are not familiar with the original Callaway twin turbo deal, it was basically an option that they had back in the day. The specs that I was looking at were like 1987, 88. And originally the motor was rated at the factory tune port, long runner L98 motor was like 245 horsepower and about 340 foot-pounds of torque or so. And the Callaway Corvette deal, the twin turbo option that they did on it, basically raised the power output to like 382 horsepower and 560 or so foot-pounds of torque. So the torque was really, really impressive. And not surprising since they continued with the long runner tune port manifolds. As you can see, even when the thing was stock, when it was NA, the factory tune port motor made 245 horsepower and 340 or so foot-pounds of torque. So it made 100 more foot-pounds than it made horsepower. So it tells you where the power production was kind of skewed on that particular motor, because it was a really long runner and it's designed to produce peak power, below 5,000 RPM, sometimes in the 4,000 RPM range. But I thought that those things were so cool because back in the day, way back then, that was kind of a supercar. So if you can believe that a motor making, 380 horsepower or so was actually kind of the epitome of supercars. And that was right in the time when GM was coming out with the ZR1, which is going to make similar kind of power, although not nearly as much torque. And in my opinion, the ZR1 was really cool. It was a 4-cam motor and it was developed by Lotus and Mercury Marine and stuff. And it was really cool and went, fast. It was a 180-mile-an-hour car back in the day. But the Callaway twin turbo was just way cooler because when you open the hood, it had two, air-to-air intercoolers, which we can argue about whether or not those things were even effective where they were positioned, but still, and the thing was running fairly low boost. And the guys at Callaway had done this previously on other vehicles. I think that they did a Volkswagen Rabbit. They did the Callaway Alfa Romeo, I think, also, if I remember right. I think that's what it was. I think they did a GTV6. And so they were fairly notorious for doing those kinds of things, those kinds of programs for the factory deals. And it worked out pretty well. They were pretty sharp at it. And those things were, like I said, pretty fast and made a tremendous amount of torque. And as you can see, if you look at the skew, it's even more dramatic on the turbo motor because they were 385 horsepower, but 560 foot-pounds of torque. So almost 200 more foot-pounds than they made horsepower. So you could see that they had a long way to go that they could have gone in this particular combination. And what I did is we took an aluminum headed L98. I can't remember if this was an 86 or an 87. I don't even know that we know what year it was because it came from the Chevy race shop and it was the guys at Vtec owned it. And they allowed me to use it. And what we did was I didn't run a twin turbo kit on it. We ran a single turbo kit from the guys at HP Performance, but that doesn't really matter. It didn't look cool like the Callaway one was with the two air-to-air intercoolers. We ran a single and a single turbo, but still at I think it was between 8 or 9 pounds. This combination made 500 horsepower and 600 foot-pounds. So it made, a good bit more power. I think we had a small cam in this motor too, which they didn't have. But it just goes to show you still that the skew in this combination, because we retained the use of the factory tune port manifold and stock heads, although that really wouldn't hold it back very much. It's still under boost. But the intake manifold was really responsible for where this thing made power. And the thing is, and this did exactly what the Callaway was said to have done, and I never got to test one, but looking at the specs on them, you can see lots and lots of torque production, and that's not uncommon. Everything that we ever ran with the tune port setup, even running it on a bigger 383 with a really big cam, running a centrifugal blower on it, whatever we ran, as long as we retained that manifold, it kind of dictated where this thing wanted to make power. And so it made the tune port motor, when you add boost to it, much more diesel-like because it made so much torque down low. And you would think, and the one thing I have to say is the tune port motor and the centrifugal supercharger was kind of a good match, because you had good torque from the tune port, and then you could extend the effective operating range of the tune port motor because you had a rising curve. You could also create that with a turbo if you had it referenced with RPM and have a rising curve, or if you just size the turbo and the combination and the wastegate size so that you could do that as well. But if you had a rising boost curve, you can extend the effective RPM, but not a lot. I mean, you'd still, the tune port is still going to do what the tune port does. Even with a rising curve, you're only going to affect it so much. But I remember doing that on my Mustang engine, and the thing would, you know, now with when I had a Vortec on it, would pull the 6,000 or more without any problem, even with the long runner manifold on it, which it certainly didn't want to do that before. I mean, you could rev it there, but it was way on the downside of the power curve. But now you've filled all that in with a boost, and you could make some, you know, some fairly good changes with it. So I thought that that was awful cool, because when I was, you know, back in the day, back in the 80s, and looking at those cars, it was like looking at the poster that you had on your wall, or a picture you had in your locker of a Lamborghini Countach, and it was that kind of fast, but it was you know, it was a Corvette, and it wasn't as cool looking as the Lamborghini was, but it was still, you know, it was kind of one of the supercars back in the day. And I really like the way that when you open the hood on them, because we raced against them when I was running the Bridgestone stuff, and when you open the hood on them, they looked really, really cool, because having two turbos and two intercoolers and all that, you know, just very symmetrical, and so it had good eyeball appeal, much better than a single offset blower or a single offset turbo. But you can still get to the power levels of doing that. It's just, you know, it doesn't have the flair. It doesn't have the panache of that Callaway Corvette. And then not long after they were doing those, they started going to the supernatural stuff. And that was, you know, it made good power. In fact, it made more horsepower, but it never had the torque production. And it also never had, in my opinion, never had the visual appeal, which makes that Callaway Corvette kind of unique. And if you ever wanted something that you could spin the tires on, yeah, that thing would do it. 560 foot-pounds, and that's what we saw. We made a little over 600 on the combination that I did at the flywheel, and it's really easy. I mean, if we would have had you know, we could have even added more boost. The boost was fairly low, like I said. I think ours was only 8.5 pounds or so. So we could certainly go up from there. It's just that, you know, it might be a little bit discouraging to see that the power curve just, you know, kind of not keep revving out past 6,000 RPM. But again, it's a different combination, it's a different design, and it does different things. It's cool to see the big torque number, though, and so that particular thing was kind of fun. And I remember getting together with the guys from HP Performance, with Jimmy back then and Nathan, and talk to them about that, and thinking, you know what, I have this L98 here. We have to run a turbo on it, because, you know, why wouldn't we? We run them on all the other things, and we know that they work really well. So how's it going to work on this tune port motor? Because I get those kinds of questions all the time. But here's the thing. Well, what does the turbo do on the tune port motor? Well, it just makes the tune port motor more of a tune port motor. So it does the things that it already does, which is produce lots of torque and not quite as much horsepower. And now with the turbo, it just raises all that up. And it's still not producing a lot of horsepower. It's producing a lot of torque, which is, again, for a guy going to Cars and Coffee with your Callaway Corvette and he wants to roast the tires and hopefully not crash into anything, that's kind of a good option. And I really like those. And I look back at a lot of these cars, and even though they're not the most effective, and that's not the car that I would choose to go on like an open track day and for me to drive at Willow Springs or at Laguna Seca or something like that, that wouldn't be my pick. But for coolness and to go down to a car show or a local deal or Cars and Coffee or whatever and pop the hood on it, that would kind of be the one. I would pick that over a supernatural version, even though the other ones might ultimately be faster. And, you know, I would still pick the other one because it's cool. Same reason I pick a lot of other cars. The Omni GLH is a perfect example. There's lots of faster cars than that, but there's none that speak to me the way that one does, and the way that the Callaway Corvette did. So that was actually the impetus of the testing that I did on that turbo 350. Again, we knew we could make a lot more power if we got rid of that tune port manifold and put something more realistic on it. The Stealth Ram from Holley is a good example. That would be a much better choice. a dual plane, a single plane, anything else on there would be a better choice. But the tune port stuff looked really cool. One of my favorite factory GM induction systems, I think, is that tune port. It just looks cool. It looks like a Klingon warship. And then adding boost to it just makes it even more torquey, which is awesome. Okay, so it's Friday night. We'll see. Friday night's not usually a very busy night for the live feed. Maybe people are out doing stuff, but you know, check in with you guys. See if you guys have any questions. Let me know what's going on. Happy Friday to everybody. Start of a weekend. Everybody be safe. So we'll start back here and see what's going on. Call me crazy, but I'd like to make a 1967 Shelby GT600 using the twin turbo V12 from the Mercedes. Hey, you got to do what you got to do, man. Diesel Dean here. You like a diesel-y? BMW 750 with the V12 for $2,500. See, how could you, a V12 for $2,500? How could you not get that? Where the turbos are going to help, the size isn't going to help with RPM unless you have a falling boost curve and the turbos are not big enough to support the power output out there. Try raising the boost on the other ones to see if they'll continue to make boost out there. Might be a boost controller problem. But if you have twin GT35s, you can make you can make 1,000 horsepower. Pennsylvania's in the house. 10 minutes in, we're already behind on likes. Come on, guys. Can I put an LS engine in my Civic and still use the Vtec? Yes. Yes, I agree, Tim. TPI should have been in trucks. A Duntov 3030 spun to 9,500 in 1971. Yeah, that probably didn't happen. Vtec has multiple cam profiles, so different lobes. And they also had Vtec I, which is different Vtec lobes and advancing or retarding the cam. $409, like a Chevy 409 big block? A Crossfire would also be cool. I do want to test one of those. Vintage American cars with newer European engines. Okay. Yeah, Justin, if you have questions on your 383, let me know. I would love to see an LSLT build that preserved the VVT. We did some of that out with Brian on the L83 and the L86 and LT1, I think. I actually want to do more Gen 4 LS stuff, like the 6-liter LY6 with VVT stuff. Karen, that's the one that I wanted to do, was an LS4 front-wheel drive Civic swap. $144 in the standing mile, 89 TPI. Nice. Yeah, boost will definitely help you. The problem is when you add, I mean, I wouldn't do heads. I would do a cam you're going to pick up the most from. But the problem is ultimately the tune port is still going to limit everything else that you put underneath it, because it's only going to want to make power in a given RPM range. Javier, I don't know. I haven't done the math on 460 liters per hour. San Jacinto is in the house. I don't know anything about BMW V12s at 200,000 miles. I mean, given how everything else seems to last that long. Ford small block 383 twin turbo using G3582s. Those will work good. Found the perfect parts car for you. 87 Daytona Shelby, rebuilt, 2.2 turbo. Guy wants 2,000 Canadian for the car. It needs floors. See, I don't care about floors. I just want the engine and the airbox and all that stuff. So Mike, send me over his information. And 56 Chevy pickup. Some of the pickups came with 409s and the 348s also. Yeah, I'm not going to ship a car, I don't think. Yeah, we don't, in California, we don't have problems with nearly the problems with the rest of the other people do in other states. The Excel, the Super Ram is better than the TunePort for a little more RPM. Take a look at the TunePort video that I have up where I tested all the intakes and you can kind of see what they all do. How do I know if I have a bad hydraulic lifter or a rocker arm? Well, if you can diagnose, a rocker arm is pretty easy to diagnose. If you have you're going to have a loose rocker arm, I doubt that it would be broke. You could look at that visually and see if it's broke. If it's loose, you can adjust it, and if it doesn't go away, then it could be a lifter. The Vtec TPI is better than the IROC or GTA. Not if they were both 350s. I don't have any experience with an Olds 260. Matthew, you can run boost on any motor. So a 5.4, a 2-valve or a 4-valve or a 3-valve. If it's a 2001, that's probably a 2-valve. And so you can run boost on that. Yeah, 409 that's a good score. That's definitely going to be valuable for somebody. What do you mean specs on the Callaway? I gave you it's 382 horsepower and 5 or 62 foot-pounds. There's a turbo 350. What else did you want? I didn't build a motor. I mean, the motor that I put together was just one that we had laying around. The Suzuki 3-cylinder from the Geo is used for aviation use. So my Sprint turbo motor is actually a plane motor. That's awesome. Las Vegas, Nevada's in the house. The 409 had a turbo 400 with it and a gear vendors. Man, that's a good score. An AFR headed 327 in a 76 Blazer? That's not anywhere near smog legal. Oh, cool. It's in an Impala. Mike, that rumor is that the Vet TunePort has bigger runners than the 305 that the TunePort was originally developed for. I was going to try to use a propane because it was already existing on a, I think on the 4200. We did a startup with one. Yeah, Tim, I don't know if they actually did vary. I'm just saying that that's the internet scuttle, is that the 305 was different than the 350. I've never seen anybody actually give me interior dimensions on them or flow from the different lower manifolds or plenums or anything. An 8722 RE, I like those motors. And a screw blower, it's going to be a small one, obviously, but it will still work. Data logging obviously is a really good idea. Even if you're not using it in real time and making changes, it's good to make a pass or run or whatever and then look at the data logging. That's how people get faster in drag racing. That's how we get faster in anything that we're doing, any road racing or whatever it is. The more logging you have, the more channels you have, the more information you can get, and the better off. I mean, that's what the dyno is basically. It's all just data logging. So a lot of ECUs will do that. We used to use the Edelbrock Quick Data for a long time on a bunch of stuff. Otherwise, I don't know what else to suggest other than the stuff that comes with the ECU that you're using for the engine. Richard, S475 turbo or T4 for a 6-liter. If you're going to pick a T4, pick something like the 7875 Gen 2, that size turbo. A T4 will work on a 6-liter. Unless you're trying to max out the turbo, I would say go with the T6. If you're not trying to do that and you're more concerned with response, then I would go with the T4. I've driven the ZR1, the LT5 from the early 90s. I did a bunch of top speed testing with it, and Vtec actually has one of those motors sitting on a crate that we want to get running, but I haven't run any of those. We did a bunch of stuff back in the day on chassis dyno stuff and at the drag strip, where we got the guys at Rick from Pacific Performance got one to run. I want to say that they ran 9s with it. Yeah, Karen, you can get S475s and T4, and I have 2 of them, but it's more expensive to get them that way. They come in T6s, and then you have to buy an optional hot side that's a T4. I think the TunePort 305 was an LB7. If I remember right. You can check that. Make that LB9, so I was close. Oh, okay, Blake. Yeah, the AFR did have some EO stuff. I think that their L98 stuff had an EO. Todd, there's no drawback to a turbo on an L96 engine. Those work just like the other stuff. Dan, were the tune ports going through mass aerometers because they were backfiring stuff, or were they just getting clogged up? No, Snafu, your 350 with that small cam on it and a VSR 7875, a T4, a 9, even with a 96 AR, it's a little bit on the tight side, but that's going to be a fairly mild combination anyway, so you should be fine. The Edelbach quick data can be used with a carb application because you're not monitoring anything from an ECU. You're monitoring other channels. Are VS Racing turbos that much better than the cheaper turbos on eBay? Well, can you find, are there cheaper turbos that, like cheaper 1,000 horsepower turbos than a VS Racing one? How much did the ZL1 engine option cost? I think it was almost as much as the car. I think it was $3,000 or $4,000 back then, back in '69. Dave, I don't know where you find a draw-through turbo. I searched around a little bit online to try to find one when I was looking for one. I even called the guys at Gale Banks to ask them if they had an old Rochester or something. I think I'm just going to use one without it, or maybe put one in myself. BMW V12 with a 6-speed manual straight cut gearbox. Wow, that's pretty sporty. I don't have a regular schedule at Vtec. Yes, a change in AR on your turbo from 96 to something else, 1.32, 1.1, 1.0. 1.0 is not going to change it very much, but a 1.32 or even a T6 housing would bring the back pressure down if that's what you want to do. The four rotor thing is very cool. If that's what you're talking about, Rob's stuff. I don't know about the metallurgy of the VS Racing turbos. An 86 S10, okay. Recently had an LQ4 with a Power Glide, good. I'd like a different transmission, and you swap to a 4L80E, okay, that's good. A manual valve body, that's all good stuff. Aftermarket bigger runners make 25 horsepower. See, it's statements like that are Mike, are the reason why I test stuff, because that's not an absolute. Lucky for you guys, there's a video up where somebody tested all of the different tune port manifolds. Were the maps not potted or something, or was all of that wiring or the circuit board loose or something? Rich, do you have an opinion on using a Merc Cruiser 3.7 as a dirt track motor? I definitely think you should try it. It sounds like a fun project. LQ9, how much nitrous with a stock piston and 22 ring gap? Now, if you already know what the ring gap is, that means you took it apart and looked at it, right? And so if you're going to run lots of nitrous, I'm sure you added ring gap, right? And not going to just keep it at 22. But to give you an idea, I've taken a 5.3 out of the junkyard, put a carburetor on it and a camshaft in it, put springs in it, and then ran plate systems until we topped out the plate, which was 300 horsepower. We never even looked at the rings, but we did eventually break the motor. So I don't have a deal on a Crossfire intake. I did find one at the wrecking yard, but it wasn't, by the time I went back, I think it was not complete. Kramer, I don't know what kind of power you're trying to make, But you got to tell me that. That's the first thing. If you ask a question about a turbo or a camshaft for a combination, tell me the power that you want, and then I can tell you exactly what kind of camshaft to use. But normally the thing is, for 700 or less, a GT45 with any small cam, any stage 1 or stage 2 truck cam, or stage 1 NA cam or stage 1 turbo cam, any of those will work. And then 1,000 horsepower, you could go up to a stage 2 anything. If you watched any of the videos I just posted recently, all of the cams work. The blower cams like the LSA and the LS9 are not ideal, so almost anything other than those works really good. Yeah, Mike says everybody hit the like button. Yeah, Dan, I don't envy you timing the cams. Hopefully they were the same side to side. LSX big block. The thing that I would check is if you don't have any vacuum leaks, which it sounds like you do, you have to check the mechanical throttle position and make sure that it's closing all the way. And the other thing I would suspect is the IEC. Check the IAC motor and see that it's not hanging open. I've never tried a rally anti-lag with a carbureted LS. Justin, was that directed at me that you live close? If you want the engine dyno, you got to talk to the guys at Vtec. Who is they also tested them, Mike? Yeah, Noodles, we were talking about the turbo tune port motor that I made. Oh, you're going to run a 1951 Henry. Okay. Dakota, all of that stuff seems right. A 215 head with a 205 intake, factory dish piston, unknown cam size. That's a fair bit of head, but it's always good to have more cylinder head, even if you're going with a mild cam. Former RPM intake, Holly 750, long tubes, all of that's right. James, the car that it actually went 256 or something, was the Sledgehammer twin turbo Corvette, and was loosely a Callaway Corvette, but it was a completely different motor. Lingenfelter did all of the stuff on it, and they went 250 odd miles an hour. But the stock ones never went that fast. This one, the one that was at the wrecking yard, at least the last time I was there, had the things that they took out of it. I think that they took the injectors out of it, which honestly, I don't know that I would use those anyway. But and maybe I could, get new ones or rebuilt ones or whatever for it. As long as all of the linkage and stuff was there, I may have somebody grab it for me next time I'm down there. Kramer, did you answer me? Yeah, if it's 750 horsepower, then you need a 750 horsepower turbo, which is easy. Can you do a wet nitrous on an alcohol fuel? Yeah, if you're using that fuel for the motor, you can also use that for the nitrous. Yeah, the Crossfire is kind of like that. Kind of like the old Cross Ram for the 69 Z28. Mike, there are guys that have used the M90s and made adapters to put carburetors on them. I don't know why you would do that, because that would be limiting the flow potential of the blower, because it also has to flow fuel. It would help cool it. Yeah, that's close enough. Second decimal points, I never even degree the cams. Only time I've ever done that is on the 2-valve and 4-valve modular stuff, and only because John Mahovitz made me do it. What's the compression number on a healthy motor 350? Are you talking, Dave, are you talking about the cranking compression or the static compression? Ooh, I like that they're bringing back the Integra. As long as they have an Integra Type R. I've not tested one of the original Z28 Cross Rams. I think Freiberger did. Well, I take that back. I think that I asked him if he actually ran one of the Z28 Cross Rams, and I don't think he did. I think he ran a bunch of aftermarket ones. What is a stoic carb engine? Does that mean that while it's running at 14.7? Or whatever other stoic value on the fuel that you're using is? Blake, yeah, the guys from Chrysler have done that on their factory cars. They've used the AC system as the intercooler. The throttle body is before the blower on the M90, but there's not a carburetor before it that would make it also have to flow fuel. Infamous Nova. LSX, see if you can just plug the IAC hole. Take the IAC out and just plug it, and then see what happens. Yeah, so Justin, you're running a 1951 Henry J twin turbo. Is that what it is? That would be kind of cool. Dakota, don't worry about the heads being too much. That's not going to do anything, even with a mild cam. Take a look at an LS3. An LS3 has a head that's a race head. I mean, it flows 315 CFM. It has a 260 cc intake port, and it has a tiny little camshaft in it that's 210-ish degrees of duration at 50. And it works just fine. It makes almost 500 horsepower. So having good heads on there is always good. The Sledgehammer C4 Corvette was Lingenfelter built the motor, and the Callaway guys, it was their car. Mike, I don't know about the blower seals. I think you'd be worried about the seals going into the bearings. I don't think that's an unpopular opinion. In my opinion, a tune port intake manifold looks a lot better than a truck LS manifold does. It's head and shoulders better looking than that. It's not head and shoulders better performing, but it's better looking. Racing, I don't know how you get a fuel solenoid to activate before the nitrous in just a standard like plate system. Although we don't seem to have as much of a problem on the like on a single plane intake manifold. The lean spike on the nitrous doesn't seem to be as bad on that combination as it does on a long runner EFI deal. Dan, all of the drunk ones are in the top row. It's a good time to ask if I should. A 5.4 is going to make more power than a 4.6. The problem with the 5.4s is their intake manifolds are usually limited, like the availability. Casey, a lot of guys go around and take all the injectors. Same thing with ECUs and mass air meters. All of that stuff is guys grab that stuff immediately. Vans, it's more than just I happen to have those cams and we use them over and over again. They're good cams, not for those being those particular cams, but they're good cams for showing kind of near the limit of where the available piston to valve clearance is on a factory bottom end. So if you have a 4.8 or a 5.3 or a 6.0 or 6.2, those cams fit in the stock bottom end stuff. And you can't go a whole lot bigger than that before you run into intake piston to valve clearance. And so they're good examples of where you can go in cam timing on some of the stock bottom end stuff. You would be you want a carburetor that's stoic at full throttle? I think you probably is way too lean. So Acura is going to unveil the Integra in 2023. It runs fine when I stick my finger in the hole. It sounds like it's got a leak somewhere. So the check and make sure, LSX, check and make sure that the IAC, that the plunger, and there's an O-ring in there too, make sure that all of that stuff is in there. Because if the IAC is, even if it's, you know, if the rod is going in and out and pushing the plunger, if the plunger is smaller than the hole is, it never seals that hole. And also there's an O-ring that seals the IAC, and when you bolt it on, make sure that that's there, because that could be another leak. But check and make sure that the IAC is sized right for the throttle body, because I've seen that a lot, especially in aftermarket throttle bodies, where you put the IAC on and it just goes in and there's a big hole around it, and so it will never seal. What's the best external wastegate company on a budget? I don't know. I don't usually use budget wastegates. I have used the CX Racing stuff from time to time in the testing. I've never run one for a long period of time. If you were to Teflon coat the compressor wheel on a blow-through turbo, would the wheel last longer? I don't think you want a Teflon coat. I think if you DLC coated, it probably would last longer. On a 4200 rebuild to a 4-block to a 7 head, what are the implications of a 04 piston, flatter top, and potential for higher relief retaining to a cam regrind? I don't know what the piston difference is between those two heads. Are they? Does one of them have valve reliefs and one of them not? I don't know. I thought that the pistons were the same. There are noodles. There are lots of different tune port intake manifolds. Take a look at the video I have up. I tested all of them. Yeah, Dan, you're building a budget 3.3 liter turbo Porsche, right? Dakota, a 108 LSA should already have a fairly noticeable idle. Mike, a Chevy inline 6-cylinder would be good with that. That M90 would work good on that. $5,000 tool cabinets. It better be full of tools and engines and hopefully a dyno. I don't think I've run the LT4 hot cam. Good place to get GT35 turbos. The guys from Max Speeding have a bunch of them. Can I send my file through here? What files are you talking about? James, you'd be better off, because I've never run that cam. If you just tell me what the specs are, I can give you a fairly good idea of what it's going to do. I don't do HP tuners. I'm not a tuner, so I will be the wrong guy to look at that. I'm still waiting patiently for a budget build on a Ferrari 5-liter H12 for a Testarossa kit car. Is it Fiero based? Oh, I remember when I was back in the day, I moved in with a friend of mine, and he already had another roommate, and the roommate drove up in his 308 Ferrari, except it was a Pontiac Fiero, and he drove and said, "Dude, you want to check out my Ferrari?" I'm like, "You know that I know something about cars, right?" He's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, that's not a Ferrari, because I know what a Ferrari looks like and what it sounds like. And when I walk over to it, I'm not going to see an automatic transmission lever in a Ferrari, and it's not going to be a Fiero." He said, "You wouldn't believe how many girls go believe that this is a Ferrari." I'm like, wow. I'm running Exxon 93 octane on a carb application. What AFR should I be at? A wide open throttle, if it's an NA motor, then 12.5 is pretty safe. If it's a boosted motor, 11.5 would be safe. Richard, you look bored. No, this is awesome. I love being on here answer questions. Should we come over the GT2 and take the? Yes, you should definitely come over the GT2, and you should take me for a ride out to Lake Berryessa. He's trying to remote tune over a live stream. Yeah, that's not going to work very good. It's not going to work very good with me, because I'm not that guy. What did I do? I compared the twin. Oh, I didn't compare the twin GT30. Oh, I did compare the twin GT35s when I did the remote stuff, and we compared twins to a single. I thought it was a 7875. The 07 piston head crown added to increase compression from 11. Yeah, but from 10.1 to 10.3. Now, is there a change in the Scott? Is there a change in the chamber size on the early and late head? Dakota's the only factory 4-barrel intake manifolds like small blocks I've ever done. I've done some of the early Snowflake ones. Like I ran the original 4-barrel intakes on the DZ302, the LT1, the 70 LT1, and then also the L76, which is the 365 horse 327. And I think that all of those had different manifolds. I've also run the cast iron, which I want to say that was on an L46. But I ran the L46, the L79, and the L82. Maybe the L82 was the one that had the that we ran the iron one on. But I ran all those 4 barrels. One of them was a quadrajet manifold also. What's your 2 cents on the Edelbrock ProFlow EFI? I've never tuned the ProFlow EFI system, so I'm not that familiar with it. Duration of 52, 18, 228. So that's a pretty mild cam. Oh, is that for the LT4 cam? Yeah, that will work. That's fairly mild for a 350. Ooh, a 1995 12 TR. Those are cool cars. That's like all Miami Vice. Yeah, Jay, I haven't seen too many of those around. Yeah, Noodles, a couple of different guys offered the big bore runners. The guys at TPIS did, SLP, I think, did. Blake, I've done a little bit of work with motorcycle engines. Excuse me. Yeah, for boost, 11.5 is a good air fuel. I'm in California, Omar. Have you seen any videos from the Horsepower Monster? Yeah, I know him. I actually reached out to him. He's got some really cool stuff. You can kind of build a budget 2-liter and a 914. Yeah, but even that, the Porsche stuff, I remember I had a 911T and a 92, I think, and I was going to build it up. And I even had people that were going to support me and give me lots of stuff because I was doing a series for European Car Magazine back in the day. And I drove the car home, and on the way home, and probably had this beforehand, it developed a rod knock. So I'm like, okay, cool, no problem. I'm just going to build another 911T motor. And then I went and talked to some people. I went and talked to Dennis, Ozzy, and Randy over at Osco, and was talking to them about Porsche stuff. And they're like, oh, you come from a Chevy and a Ford and a Dodge and a Honda background. You're not going to like what you hear when it comes time to like putting one of these motors together. And he was right. I did not like the numbers at all. Yeah, the Jeep 6-cylinder turbo deal was pretty neat. That's that Jeep turbo thing interests me. I saw a guy on Facebook saying 055. I don't know what an 055 intake is. The problem with doing a spread bore intake is that you're also having to run a spread bore carburetor. And you can't keep the carburetor the same because then you have to run some kind of adapter if you run a Holly on both of them, or if you try to run a quadrant on both of them. Then you're okay with. Then we have an adapter to deal with, or you have a spread bore carburetor and a spread bore intake versus a Holly flange 4150 carburetor and intake, and then so you're comparing kind of two things. Well, the horsepower monster is a magazine guy from way back also. Yeah, you're right, Dan. The labor on the 911 thing, because I even tried to hit people up. You know, I'm going to do a story, all that on rebuilding, and they're like, yeah, we could rebuild it and we'll make it into a a 2.4 or 2.7. I'm like, oh yeah, this is all good. He's like, it's only going to be like, I could probably do you a really good deal. It's going to be like 13 or 14,000. I'm like, yeah, even if it's 13 or 1400, it would still be too much. Yeah, Scott, they definitely had a change in valve. I just didn't know if they have a chamber size. So if you're only going from 10.1 to 10.3 or 4, that's not much of a change in dome size. So I don't think you have to worry about, with the cams that you were able to get as regrinds, I don't think you have to worry about piston to valve clearance. Is there a TPS and IAC reset for an LQ? I don't know about that on the factory programming. Yes, a 914.6. My buddy Carl Young had one of those that I got to drive, and it was pretty cool. Yeah, Holly did spread bore carburetors. Ever tested different thermostats? We don't have to test thermostats. We can run the water temperature at whatever water temperature we want. And yeah, water temperature does make a difference in power. And that would be cool. A 911 with a Cadillac. I've seen V8 stuff, but not a Cadillac though. Dan, Tim wants to know what size the 914.6 was. It was fairly small, wasn't it? Blake, I haven't seen anything with the desmodromic valve stuff like the Ducati had on an automotive engine. Julius is here. Yeah, Julius, I agree. I saw the twin turbo 6 deal. Oh, so it was all the way down at 2 liters. Mercedes has a springless valve train on the Gullwing. The SLR had Desmo on it. I didn't think that they had that kind of valve train. So, Julius, how's your stuff going? Yeah, go buy a Gullwing. See how much those are. Yeah, the SLR I thought was the injected inline six-cylinder because that's the motor that they use in that. I bought my mom a 230 SL Mercedes back when I was in college as a Christmas present. Paid for it for a long time. But that engine is basically what Nissan copied to make the 240 and 260 and 280Z engines. And it was very, very, because I had my Z before we got that, and I looked at the engine, and I'm like, this looks really familiar. And that's kind of the motor, yeah. And the SLR had a completely different intake manifold on it. 54 to 55 Mercedes racing engines were Desmond drove. Oh, cool. I'd never even looked into that. Yeah, and they were awesome looking. The air brake thing was not great. The SLR was a straight 8. Yeah, Scott, Kevin's a good guy over there. The SL was a 6-cylinder though, right? Not the racing ones. Yeah, they did have mechanical fuel injection. That's what my mom's car had. Casey, you knew Carl Young. He was one of the few who did not pitch when I got a beat up 76 Honda Civic. A 76 would be good. 1235, nice. For a road race car, would you recommend a small V8 or a big V8 displacement wise? It depends on what you're trying to do. More power is always better. Yeah, I had a turbo NSX those were good cars. Yeah, 300 SL was the street car and the 300 SLR was the race car, right? Why aren't you talking about Corvettes? We did talk about Corvettes the whole beginning of this. Have you ever had experience testing the elusive L88? No, I haven't. I tried to build one, and I know somebody who has a brand new set of heads, original in the box GM L88 heads, but he won't let me put them on a motor though. Yeah, 440 is a good. That would be good to 75. Yeah, Ron's got one more, and then he's gone. Well, Jewish, hey man, you stay safe, stay healthy. All this other stuff will happen. I'm not familiar with the 32 valve Oldsmobile engines. Well, the nice thing, Dan, is on an NSX, you don't have to check the valve flash. It's already right, and it never goes out because it's a Honda. Would you ever try linking two engines together? Probably not. I did see the 2JZ in the Charger, yep. Shooting, what kind of power do you want to make from your 416? So we have 200 horsepower turbos or all the way up to 1,000, and then all the way up to 2,000. Depends on what size turbo and how much power you want to make. A 440 was a good motor. It was pretty torquey. They don't have a lot of cylinder head on them. None of the factory heads were that great, but they, they were big enough that they made good torque. I can tell you that the NSX is the only car that I've driven where when I was driving home in the NSX by myself on Highway 5, and it's the only car that girls drove up and flashed me in. So to me, the NSX definitely gets thumbs up, and it looked fantastic, and it was like driving a really good looking, sexy kind of, Japanese Ferrari. It was basically a Honda Civic that was just awesome looking. Building and testing a blow-through carburetor. Maybe I might do that. Yeah, the ZL1 was an aluminum block option for the L88 essentially. Yeah, the NSX sounded really good. The thing that it needed is it didn't have nearly enough torque. So if it would have had a good twin screw on it, or a turbo. When we put a single turbo on it, when the guys from HP did it, and even driving it around at 400 at the tire, it was really a lot more fun. But it was it made 525 or something when they turned it up a little bit. At 8,000 RPM, you don't need to vary the air fuel ratio based on RPM. You're going to vary the timing. Yes, was a big win for the NSX. And in the NSX, it was a double flash. So it was two girls, which was awesome. And the tandem thing, I applauded them, and it was great. I told my then girlfriend, Lisa, before I married her, what a good drive I had coming up. I found a Saab vacuum retard, a boost retard vacuum advanced canister. I had that on the Sprint Turbo distributor has that also. It does both under vacuum and boost. You can see if you can apply that to an HEI. A K24 and a Fiero would be a good swap. So, Justin, are you still talking about the Henry? Yeah, the ZL1 was very pricey, which is why not very many people did it. Catch, you can do super chats if you want to donate. Can you dyno an L88? I don't have one, unfortunately, and I don't know how to put one together without. You have to have, for the L88, it's easy to do the bottom end stuff. You can duplicate the 12-to-1 or 12.5-to-1, whatever that was. It's easy to do a block and a crank and rods and pistons. That's easy enough. The camshaft, you can get a duplicate of that. The factory heads are very, very hard to find. The factory intake is very, very hard to find. The factory carburetor is and by that, I mean, you can't find them. So if I had $100,000, I could go get one of these and dyno it, and people would sell me these things. But I don't have them laying around from people that I could get and run them and give them back, because obviously I can't afford to do an L88. Would it be a good idea to use an electric fuel pump and oil cooler to cool my turbo oil? We did that on the Vtec that I had. We ran the oil through an oil cooler and then into the blower, and then it drained back out into the pan. Or you could just run an oil cooler as a big oil cooler and then cool all of the oil, which is probably a better idea. Yeah, Dan, I remember the first time I ran in an early 3-liter turbo, and it was like an on-off switch, but it was really impressive. You won't make. Oh yeah, with a turbo you can make 600 easy. If you want to make a 600 horsepower with an LQ9, you don't. All you have to do is add boost to it. That's really easy. Any kind of camshaft that you put cam and springs and boost, and your 600 is really, really easy. As a matter of fact, you're gonna have trouble only making that much. It's probably going to be more than that. The thing that really made the L88 and the LS6 wake up was a set of long tube headers compared to the factory exhaust manifolds. Question on another ZL1. Does anyone know if the LS9 fits the LSA supercharger? I don't know what you mean by the LS9. The LS9 motor or the LS9 blower? The supercharger that they use on the LS9 is bigger than the LSA. So if you swap that assembly over, that blower will make more power, if that's your question. Yeah, the LS6 had cast heads. Yeah, the trigger, the one that you're going to find in the junkyard is going to be an L31. You're not going to find a 375 horse 327. Not that that would really make that much more power than the L31 anyway, but you won't find a fuely 327 Corvette motor in there, nor will you find a 1970 LT1 or a DZ302 or anything that made lots of power back in the day. You will find lots of L31s though, and if you put any kind of cam in that motor and a dual plane and a carburetor on it, it will make what all of those hot rodded motors made back in the day, and will do it a lot easy. It's not going to have, it doesn't have to be 11-to-1. It doesn't have to be real cammy. So Dan, you're talking about the old L89 aluminum head options on those big blocks, because that was available in a lot of different combinations. The L89 head option was actually available on the 375 horse 396s. I don't know if it was available yet on the Hokey 65 425 horse 396, but it was available on the a lot of the different big blocks like the L72. It may have even, I don't know if it was available still in 1970 on the LS6, but on a lot of the 327s and the 396s, you could get that aluminum head upgrade or option. I don't know how much of an upgrade it was. That would be an interesting test to find out if an L89 head was actually a power. They rated them the same to see if the L89 head was actually a performance upgrade on the motor. And we know that it changed the weight, which would definitely help acceleration, but I don't know if it actually changed the power. And the International Scout got you that, huh, Casey? Nice. Yes, an L31 came with a hydraulic roller cam. The NSX was 24 PSI. Yeah, we never ran anything anywhere near that. £16 on 91, that's kind of a lot. Yeah, 461 X head is not, it's rare, but it's not a very good head. Omar, we use twin 45s on the motors that we run. But if you use a single, you could go bigger than that, like a 50 or a 60. I'm planning on retarding timing with an MSD6 when the map reads low PSI to keep the turbo spooling. So you're going to retard timing at lower kPa? I don't think that that's going to do what you want it to do. Typically, in a map, you're going to have more timing out of boost and then less timing in boost. I don't know what the casting number is on the L31 block. Trigger 235 cam is not going to fit in that L31 with an AFR enforcer head. With the factory piston in it, I doubt. Either way, Casey, a win is a win. That goes in the W column. Catch, thank you very much. And I've got 2 more minutes. I got to get off. Got stuff to do. The measurement on the wastegate is the flow orifice, the opening. Yeah, Dan, it's amazing the difference in the carbs can flow. And they go through that with intakes and everything else too. Trigger, not necessarily a dish piston, just a piston that has valve release in it for the for that camshaft. The dish a lot of times isn't going to help you. It's going to lower the compression, but it might not give you any more piston to valve clearance if the edge of the piston still doesn't have a valve relief cut in it, where the piston would intersect the valve. So just make sure if you're going to put pistons in it that they have valve release. I'm thinking when I close the throttle, it'll make vacuum. So if it sees vacuum at 6,000 RPM, you could retard timing. So you're only going to retard it under high vacuum and high engine speed. Okay, you can try that. Uh, 292 with a turbo on it is good. Catch, yes, the email I usually put out here and then I got to get going. There we go. Okay, guys, I got to get going. Thank you all for showing up. More videos, as always, coming up. You guys have a good night. Be safe out there, man.